Welcome back to Life's Challenge. My name is Avital, and this week's Parsha is Parshat Terumah, which is a wonderful Parsha because in this Parsha, the entirety of the Parsha covers the instructions God gives us for building the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which was the temporary dwelling that the Jews would use for their 40 years in the desert in their service of God. It's where they would bring their offerings, it's where God's presence would rest, it was where Moses would go to talk to God. And so it's an exciting time for the Jewish people that they are getting all of the instructions from God about what the Mishkan should be built out of, how large it should be, the dimensions, all of the items that are going to be inside of the Mishkan. It's a really intricate and detailed Parsha, and we recognize that it has to be important if an entire Parsha is dedicated just to the subject of the construction and the materials and all of the different items that are going to be inside the Mishkan. And the way that Parsha begins is by telling the Jewish people what offering they're going to bring in the Mishkan, what offering they're going to bring to God. And right after that, it goes through and tells us the items that are going to be inside the Mishkan. So the way it worked in the Mishkan is there was a courtyard, where in the courtyard they had different, they had the altar and different items. And then there was an interior portion, separated by curtains, that would be the inside of the Mishkan. And on the inside of the Mishkan, we had the ark and its covers, which the ark would be where the tablets with the 10 Commandments would go inside of. There was the table, the shulchan, which is where the challahs, the showbreads, as it's called in the Torah, would be placed in order to be prepared all the time for service. And it had the menorah which was made out of one big block of gold. That was also the instructions for how to create the menorah was given to us in this Parsha. So it starts with what's inside of the Mishkan, what's inside of the tabernacle, and then it moves to that outside portion. In that outside section, it covers the curtains that would be used to divide between the different sections of the Mishkan. It talks about the planks that would be used for sort of the floor and the walls. It talks about the covering above, and it does also provide dimensions with what the courtyard should look like and where things should be placed within the courtyard. When you look at this Parsha and you look at how much time is dedicated to the materials that are going to be used, the gold, the copper, the silver, the acacia wood, the beautiful dyed ram skins, it's really easy to say, gosh, this sounds materialistic. Gosh, this sounds like God really cares so much about the more material items, the more superficial things, the way things look, the way it's presented. It would really feel like that's what's important to God because God is giving us those instructions for all of these materialistic looking things. But I'd say two things about that. The first is I would argue that to God it didn't really matter what the Mishkan looked like, what the tabernacle looked like. Rather, it was for us. It was so that we would feel connected to the Mishkan, that we had to put so much effort both into the creation and into the regal nature of the items that were being used. To use those rich, luxurious, royal items really elevated for the people their service of God, because here they were dwelling in the desert. Who knows what their living conditions were really like? The tents they were in, sleeping outside, whatever it happened to be, who knows what their living conditions were? And they were building this beautiful, beautiful structure for God. And so that when they would go to serve God, they would feel like, wow, we're going to the temple. We're going, the temporary temple, but they're going to this place where they can serve God and where it feels elevated and it feels holy and it feels like you're going to see the King. So that's on the one hand. But on the other side, what I'd also say about that is that when you look at the order in which we were told about the items for the Mishkan, it started with what was going to be inside of the Mishkan, what's going to be inside the tabernacle. It didn't start with the outside. It didn't start with those exterior elements that were important, walls, floors, roofs. It started with those interior items, those items that were going to actually be used for service, those items that were actually going to be utilized to serve God for service. And so if you look at the order as a priority list, God is showing us that it is what's inside here that matters. It's not the external appearance of the structure, but the way that those items are going to be used and the value that you're going to gain from connecting with God, from serving God in the way that he designed. So while at first glance the Parsha might appear like, wow, this is really focused on material items and it's really focused on the specifications of materialism, when you take a deeper look at the Parsha, the intention is clear, that the intention is not this exterior, that the intention is not this, beautification for the sake of beautification. It's beautification for the sake of elevating the service, and it's beautification after function. All of the things in the tabernacle had to be functional. They had to be things that people could use for the service. There's nothing really in there that doesn't have a purpose. All of the items that were listed in this week's Parsha are things that were used directly in service of God. And so I think it's a really beautiful lesson that we can learn. Yes, we should make things beautiful. Yes, we should focus on elevating our service by beautifying it. But at its core, what's more important are those inside elements. It's the inside that matters before the outside. I think that's really something important to keep in mind, because so often we want to make, as an example, if you want to have people over for a Shabbat meal, you can focus so much on making the table look nice and making all the foods be the best they can be and trying to do all of these things to, impress other people, to elevate the day, whatever it happens to be. But actually at its core, what matters there is the service itself. What matters there is the having people over. It's the creating Shabbat for them and for yourselves. It's not as much in the fine details as it is in creating that environment, the proper environment for Shabbat. So I hope we can all take that lesson to heart. I wish you all a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.